Hey everyone. So, probably the best piece of entertainment that came out of the year of 2017, and I know the year's not over yet at the time I'm recording this, but still the best piece of entertainment that came out of 2017 was definitely Season 3 of Twin Peaks, aka Twin Peaks The Return, aka Twin Peaks A Limited Event Series, I guess. So many names for this thing. Now, after the season had ended, there were a lot of questions, to to put it mildly. So we were left to sort of basically pick through the evidence of the show, whether it's through rewatching the episodes, or picking apart the dialogue, or the sequence of events, or the mise-en-scène, or whatever, to try and piece together what happened after the show, or even what happened during the show, as far as interpreting this quasi-surreal, supernatural mystery thing. But we did get some answers following the end of that show, and that was through co-creator of Twin Peaks, Mark Frost's Twin Peaks: The Final Dossier. Yes, thank you. So, as you can see, it's a very, very short book. I think it's less than 200 pages. And it says on the cover that it is a novel. That is being a little generous. It's more like a series of fictitious essays that act as an epilogue to the TV show. So, basically, what we're getting is things that the show, or the new season, or the limited event series, or whatever, didn't have time to explain or cover within that show, as well as maybe a few clarifications. I wouldn't say answers specifically, but certainly clarifications to what is in the body of the show. Like, I don't think there are any answers in this book that you couldn't figure out by watching the show, but basically I think this was Mark Frost's attempt to say, hey, let's take some of your maybe false interpretations or slightly askew interpretations of what him and Lynch were going for, and let me just clarify that for you, and then you can unwrap the mysteries based on a proper interpretation of the evidence we provided to you. That's my think of it. Anyway, prior to the premiere of this, we did get a book that was more of a novel. It's more of a found object novel thing. And it was sort of meant to bridge the gap between the last we had seen of the Twin Peaks universe, which would basically be the finale of Season 2, as well as the aspects of the movie Fire Walk With Me, which did kind of expand some of the mythology and things of that nature. So Fire Walk With Me, Season 2's finale, and the missing pieces also, which all carry over into the final event. Or the most recent aspects of the chronology fairly well. And that book was The Secret History of Twin Peaks. Personally, I hated this book. It was just sort of a mix of a lot of boring alien shit and continuity errors. So when I found out that after Season 3 that we would get this book, my expectations were a bit lowered because I did not like this so much. And I think even David Lynch was quoted as saying, oh, well, that's Mark's Secret History of Twin Peaks, that's not mine. It's a horrible David Lynch impersonation. So, I mean, this had a couple good things in it, but I could probably count them on one hand. I was not a fan of this book at all. And it seems that with the Final Dossier, Mark Frost was giving fans a bit more of what they actually wanted when they had that other book. Like, I would prefer The Secret History not exist, and then the good parts of that were just mixed in with this. But yeah, so this is much better. This one also sort of retcons some things to sort of close some of the loopholes and continuity errors of Secret History, but it doesn't really go all the way. So what I'm going to do in this video is just kind of go over some of the bigger clarifications and explanations from this book. If you don't want that and you just want to read the book yourself, fine. You can probably read it in like 2 hours if you have time. I didn't really have a lot of time to read because of what's going on in my life, so I got this delivered to me when it was released on Halloween, and I just picked through it for like 2 weeks, and eventually I got through it just because I was just finding like 10 minutes here and there to read a little bit of it. But let me just go into this. So, I should say that much like The Secret History of Twin Peaks, the narrator of this book is Tammy Preston, Agent Tammy Preston. What's sort of disappointing about the TV show version is that the character of Tammy Preston was really bland, and that's why she was sort of a fan-hated character. People didn't really like Tammy on the show, and people were just saying, oh, she's only on there because David Lynch is a horny old man and finds the actress attractive, whatever. But the Agent Tammy in both books actually has like a personality and sort of an interesting snarky sense of humor kind of thing to her, and I kind of wish that the Tammy from Mark Frost's books was the Tammy we saw on the TV show, where instead in the TV show she mainly just exists to give someone to give basically Gordon Cole and Albert someone to exposit to and explain things to the audience by using her as a proxy for the audience. So I wasn't too much of a fan of that going on. But the book answers there was a few plot threads from the original TV show that weren't really picked up, or the movie, that weren't really picked up in the new season. So I like that it covered that. For instance, Leo Johnson, Shelley's husband, the last time we saw him, he was, having tarantulas dangled over his head, and we never found out what happened to him. So this book actually starts with the autopsy of Leo Johnson, where he was shot to death. And it seems that he was shot to death by someone who had a lot of training. So Albert believes that it was Wyndham Earle who did this. From reading the autopsy report that Albert writes, and it writes really much in that Albert Miguel Ferrer voice. It's a shame that he passed away. I'm thinking maybe it was actually Evil Cooper who had killed him just to tie up loose ends. Because there wasn't much that he actually needed to do. I mean, there's no reason Evil Cooper had to kill Leo. It didn't really affect what his plans were going forward. But it seems like just for tying loose ends' sake, it was probably him. That, and just based on the cutaway to Leo in the season finale, or series finale at that time of season 2, it seems like he was still alive during the events of the finale. And Wyndham Earle never escaped the Black Lodge because Bob killed him. So it seems like when Evil Cooper got out, he probably just visited and shot him to death. My guess. So we do get that part of it. One of the other cliffhangers, I guess you could say, from season 3 was what happened to Amanda Seyfried's character, Becky. In my opinion, the show visually wants you to believe that she's dead, because all we really see is we see Mark Frost's character talking to Harry Dean Stanton's character and pointing to the trailer that they live in, and there's a broken window and it's very ominous. And because Becky's husband kills himself while Gersten is crying and everything, and what they're saying, it's heavily meant to imply that Becky's dead. And that would sort of go for the tragic figure that she's sort of built up a little bit to be when she's introduced. Because the blonde hair, blue eyes, it's very much trying to make a connection between her and Laura Palmer from years ago. But the book comes out and just says that she's still alive. So, I mean, maybe that's just Frost and Lynch had a disagreement, and Lynch made it visually seem that Becky's dead, but Frost is like, no, I want her to be alive. So, but according to the book, and if we're gonna, I guess we can take the book as canon unless we get a season 4, which my guess is we're probably not going to, because Lynch will die before that happens, or before they have a chance, especially if this took 5 years to write, 4.5 years to write. So, I don't know, but she's alive. Donna Hayward, Laura Palmer's best friend, who's played by Laura Flynn Boyle in the show, and then she didn't want to come back for reasons I won't get into in this video, but then played by Moira Kelly in Fire Walk With Me, and actually I like that version of Donna better. She's not mentioned at all in season 3. We still see Doc Haywood, we still see a lot of the other people involved in her life, but Donna's not even mentioned. So at least the book tells us what happened to her, where she moved to New York City, she became a model, she didn't talk to her father or her mother after the revelation in season 2 that it's actually Ben Horne who was her real dad, because her mother had an affair with him. But yeah, she became a model, she'd been to rehab a few times, she married someone who was 20 or 30 years her senior, who was some .com billionaire, and they ended up divorcing. But eventually she ended up reconciling with Doc Haywood, her, the man she thought was her father. And apparently she had reached out to Audrey Horne, because, you know, they were actually sisters, and sent her 2 letters, but the book doesn't disclose what those letters said, but I assume she revealed what their relationship was to each other. So it was nice to at least find out what happened to that character, because obviously Laura Flynn Boyle wasn't going to come back, and there probably wasn't much of an organic way to wrap that character into what was happening in the events, unless, you know, they just ran into her on the street in New York City during the scenes of the glass box, but even then, who knows. Alright, what is happening with Audrey Horne is still a big, probably one of the biggest questions left after the new season, and I might make a video about what I think is happening or dealing more with that, but at least this book does narrow the mystery, I guess, because after season 3 we were wondering, did she ever wake up from the coma? Did she die in the coma? Is she in a mental hospital, or is she somewhere supernatural, the Black Lodge? What's going on with her? At least this book at least tells us a little bit more about what happened, where apparently she was in a coma following the events of the season 2 finale for about like 3.5 weeks. And then 2 months after that, she finds out that she's pregnant because, you know, evil Cooper had raped her while she was passed out. We don't really find out what she thought about this. I mean, we know from season 3 that she still had a picture of Cooper in his suit, so she apparently still thought well of him, so I don't think the idea that Cooper raped her ever came into his mind. Maybe she thought someone else raped her in the hospital, or maybe she thought it was John Justice Wheeler, the Billy Zane character, who had impregnated her, because she did lose her virginity a few episodes before the season 2 finale. But she raises Richard. The book doesn't really tell us what her relationship with her son was like very much, just that around Richard's 10th birthday, Audrey married her longtime accountant, who I guess is more or less meant to be the Charlie figure we see in season 3, and that it was completely just financial. Despite that, there's... Hey, Carl. Despite that, there's some talk in the book about them going to marriage counseling and public outbursts of drunkenness and infidelity and all that kind of stuff. So, Carl. So, I guess they did try to make something work, but then I guess they ended up divorcing or something. And that Audrey never went back to high school. She got a GED, and then after getting a few degrees for the community college, she opens a beauty salon, which I would not have guessed from her, but okay, I guess that's what happened. And then 4 years before the events of season 3, so Richard would have been like 21 at this time, she just disappeared and no one knows what happened to her. And there's rumors that maybe she went to a mental institution, maybe she ran off in the woods, I don't know. So basically we don't have any clues as to where she is during the events of season 3 and everything we see there. We don't get any answers to that, but at least we get some clarification as to what was going on between season 2 and where we see her, and that she did wake up from the coma and all of that stuff, and she did have some relationship with Richard. So that was good to know. One of the big questions, the question we were left with for 20-something years, how is Annie? What happened to the Heather Graham character of Annie Blackburn? In the secret history, she's not mentioned at all, and in fact, we hear that Norma's parents are dead and doesn't have any siblings, but we know that's not true because we saw Norma's mother on the show. And this book papers over the continuity errors and says that it was actually her stepmother, and basically, the Final Dossier covers up some of the continuity errors with regard to Norma's character. But, essentially, what we find out is, because the last thing we saw of Annie was in the missing pieces, where we see that she's in the hospital, she's got the Black Lodge ring, and then a nurse takes it off of her, and then somehow between then and the 3rd season, it ends up on Dougie's hand. So, but we find out that she was in a coma for a while, because everyone was in a fucking coma after season 2. It's a very soap opera-y thing, and Twin Peaks was very much based on like that soap opera kind of thing, so it makes sense. But Annie was in a coma for a while, then she woke up and was sort of catatonic where she didn't say anything, and then after a while she would at least sit up in a chair or walk around by herself, and Norma had been taking care of her for a while at her house. And then Norma came home one day to see that Annie had attempted to kill herself by like slitting her wrists. So after that, Norma had to give her full-time psychiatric care, so she put her in a hospital. And at the only time Annie ever said anything was she said the phrase, "I'm fine," once. And that every year on the anniversary of the day she came back after the Black Lodge, she would just say, "I'm fine" at a certain time. So I guess the answer to "How's Annie?" is "I'm fine." But she's not actually fine because she's catatonic. After everything that she went through, she tried to kill herself, and she's just maybe she has a rich internal life, maybe her brain is still in the Black Lodge and her body is somewhere else, but it's a really sad, tragic ending to her. But Annie's only mentioned once in season 3, and it's in passing. It's about a reference to what Laura writes in her diary following that sort of dream sequence where she talks to Annie in Fire Walk with Me. And that's the only time she's name-checked. But so this at least explained what happened to her. And, Cooper, after he gets out of the lodge, he doesn't seem to care about Annie or Audrey or anything. It's just Diane, and, well, that's a subject for another video as far as what Cooper's mindset was, that I'll talk about at some other point, because I do plan on making a handful of Twin Peaks-related videos. But at least we find out what happened to Annie. So now we just have to find out what year is it. There's clarification on Sheriff Harry Truman. He has cancer, because we're told in season 3 that he's sick, and that's why his brother took over as sheriff. But we never find out, precisely what was happening. But it's cancer. The real reason he's not in the show is because the actor had retired and didn't want to appear again. But yeah, they decided not to kill him off screen, which was nice. And then there's some clarification about Evil Cooper and his motives in the book. It does definitively say that the glass box was run by and funded by Evil Cooper. Basically, Evil Cooper, who himself is possessed by Bob. That Evil Cooper is the dweller on the threshold that is mentioned in season 2. And now he's possessed by Bob. And so Evil Cooper is trying to get to Judy, who is that evil creature that spawned from the atomic bomb in episode 8, and is possessing Sarah Palmer for reasons. But he's trying to find her. And the goal in season 3 is that he's trying to find these coordinates to get to Judy via portal. And so the book sort of clarifies that Evil Cooper had been building up this criminal enterprise, the glass box being part of it, in order to find Judy and to find basically what's called the Zone in season 3, but basically the sort of Grand Central Station of the other dimensions, while still staying outside of the Black Lodge because he didn't want to be trapped there again. And it seems that the reason for that is that if Judy and Bob could get together again, it would cause, like, hell on Earth or the end of days or something like that, like a big apocalyptic event, and that's what Evil Cooper was going for with Bob in tow. I guess the funny thing is that if Evil Cooper spent 25 years trying to find Judy, and Judy was just in Twin Peaks all along possessing Sarah Palmer, then he didn't have to do nearly as much stuff as he was doing. But we also don't know if Judy had been inside Sarah Palmer all that time. The book does clarify that the girl we see in season 8, where that frog locust thing goes into, that is Sarah Palmer as a kid. So that whether that bug is Judy, or whether different people were inhabited with the bug, and then Judy can jump into anybody who that bug went into, I don't know. But if Judy vomited and Bob was in the vomit, why couldn't Bob and Judy just automatically then? Why were they separated? Book doesn't answer that. But at the very least, what we do know is that the reason that it takes 25 years for these events to set in motion is, like, why did he have to wait for this time for Evil Cooper to go after Judy? Why wasn't he doing this from day one? But it seems that he had to get the coordinates from Major Briggs. Major Briggs had been hiding in what the Matthew Lillard character calls the Zone, or the Mauve Zone, or wherever we see his head floating around saying Blue Rose. But Evil Cooper isn't able to find him until Briggs leaves there to talk to the Matthew Lillard and the librarian girl. And it's by leaving the Zone that his presence alerts Evil Cooper. And then Evil Cooper was able to go and murder him in order to try and get the coordinates. But basically, because Briggs made the mistake of leaving the Zone, that's what allowed Evil Cooper to set off the events that we start to see in Season 3. And if Briggs had never left the Zone, none of this would have set into motion, but that's why it took so long. So at least it kind of explains some of that. But again, we still don't know why Judy is in Sarah Palmer. My own theory is that Sarah Palmer had the reason she's drinking and all this stuff is to keep Judy at bay. Because, I mean, her husband was possessed by Bob at a time, so she might have some basic knowledge of this stuff. But that's why she's doing that. She's just trying to keep Judy from coming out, I guess. But why Evil Cooper couldn't find Judy in Twin Peaks until he had the coordinates, who knows. But at least we had some clarification as far as what C's plan was and what he had been doing for 2.5 decades. There's some other random answers and stuff within the book, but you can read that for yourself. I just wanted to go over some of the bigger ones, some of the bigger answers we get, and filling in. And I'd say, yeah, it sort of just puts us on the right track as far as what questions to answer, and sort of is just, the goal of the book isn't really to answer things that much, it's to push us in the direction of the right questions instead of answering questions that are just random conspiracy theories that Frost and Lynch did not intend. And it's to cover things that Season 3 just didn't have time to cover that the fans still want to know, like about Donna and Annie, and some clarification on Audrey. So, if you don't have time to read the book or whatever, I just gave you the basics, and unlike The Secret History, which I would not recommend reading, just read a plot summary of it, and you'll get the basic points of it. But otherwise, I'd recommend this. Oh, I did forget one major thing. Well, one minor thing, which is the thing I didn't like about the book, is Mark Frost hates Donald Trump, which is fine. I hate Donald Trump. Most people with an IQ above 90 hate Donald Trump. But much like Richard Nixon has the Owl Cave ring in The Secret History, he throws in a sly mention of Donald Trump having the ring. And it's, I mean, I've talked about it in the video where I talked about buying this replica of the ring, about, is the ring good or bad, what are its different powers, and all that stuff, but it was just like, you're taking me out of the universe. Did you really have to give Donald Trump the Owl Cave ring? Anyway. Oh, but so at the end of Season 3, we see Cooper go back in time and save Laura Palmer, and then we see that it cuts to like the pilot episode, and Laura's wrapped in plastic corpse disappears, so that Pete Martell never finds her. The book clarifies that in this new timeline that's been created, Laura Palmer was not murdered, she just went missing. And that Tammy's memory is starting to change. Like, she remembers Laura Palmer is dead, but then that's starting to fade away from her as the timeline's changed. Now, what's funny is, in the second to last episode, Cooper and Gordon go to visit Philip Jeffries. Cooper and the one-armed man, or Mike, go to visit Philip Jeffries. And before Philip Jeffries allows Cooper to go back in time, Jeffries tells Cooper Gordon will remember the unofficial version. Now, that leads me to believe that if there were a Season 4, that Gordon Cole would be the only person outside of Cooper and Diane and those Lodge people and all that stuff that remember the original timeline. And the book also clarifies that in the new timeline, Leland Palmer committed suicide, he shot himself. And so a lot of what happened in the original Twin Peaks series still came to pass in the exact same manner. It's just that the fate of Laura Palmer and some of the specifics related to that investigation have now changed. Okay, so, because how the timeline has changed and everything was also something very confusing, so at least the book clarifies that. And the whole thing about Gordon remembering, that's just me making a connection. But okay, so that was my little rundown of the Final Dossier. I'd still recommend you read it yourself if you're a big Twin Peaks fan like I am. But if you just don't have time, you don't like tie-in books, maybe you don't consider Mark Frost, even though he's co-creator, to be canon, and you just kind of want to hear the possible stuff, even though maybe some of this could be contradicted later, go ahead. But Secret History sucks. Don't read Secret. I don't know what Frost was doing there, but that's it.